Welcome to episode 2 of our new AI group podcast. This is candid conversations about AI and the state of play. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to get you on here pretty early because you're our workstream lead here for our tasks project subpart of Fin. So you're responsible for the bit of Fin that integrates with all these external systems, calls APIs, and it's consequential if a mistake is made. And I think your work stream is very interesting because you're pushing the models right to the cutting edge in terms of reliability. Before we get into all that, let's talk a little bit about you. Can you tell me a little bit about your background as an engineer, how you got here quickly?
Cool. Yeah, I'm Pratik. I've been doing engineering or working at software for about 12 years now. And I started out in India with Flipkart, which was an e-commerce startup which grew quite well. And then I dabbled in a bunch of startups after that. I joined Intercom in 2016. So I've been here for too long, 9 years now.
Well, you were working mostly in the back end stuff at it.
Yeah. So
back end before Intercom too? Or?
Yeah, back end before Intercom. I was mostly full stack, but I would say distributed systems is where I think I'm really good at.
Yeah.
And Intercom helped me hone that skill even further for the next 4 or 5 years.
Cool.
With stuff with mobile engineering and things like that as well, experimental.
Well, one reason I really wanted you to join the AI group is because I think you bring a combination of back-end distributed systems knowledge, but also you've a very good product head on your shoulders. Well, where did that come from? How did you get good at product?
I was going to say, I think you've got that wrong.
Okay, cool.
No, I did a bit of product. I think that even the back-end stuff has a lot of product. If you think about it from a product perspective, how do we roll it out, etc. It's there's some elements. I did, there was a project that we had where we built lead qualification and other capabilities in a very short time span. I think it was 45 days to get that feature out.
At Intercom.
At Intercom.
Right.
So that was there. I was always interested in the way that Intercom thinks about product. Even well back when I was a founding engineer in a startup, I used to quote our blogs about saying no to the requirement of a customer at times and being disciplined about thinking about your vision, etc.
So was that at Intercom or before Intercom?
I think that was before Intercom.
Okay.
So I had that mindset already.
All right, fine. So I guess you were in a bunch of startups. You're
Yeah.
an engineer, so that gave you some sort of a grounding, and then Intercom kind of honed it.
Honed in, and then I think there was stints with the operator team in Intercom where I did work on the product, for example, Looping Bot.
Yeah.
I do have a high bar, I think, of product. I think one of the reasons I left that team was because I was disappointed at what we were doing personally.
Okay.
I didn't feel we were actually adding good quality resolution, really, and more deflection, in the category. So I did leave it. But yeah, I've worked on some products which I was really happy about, the mobile carousel product, for example, at Intercom. Yeah.
Okay, and so you joined the AI group about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
I think about two odd years ago. Yeah,
fine,
May
fine.
23.
Okay, cool. And you initially started off kind of working on Copilot and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, so I started off working on Copilot, which was amazing. I got to learn with a bunch of scientists on the team. So I have no background in statistical knowledge, etc., beyond what I did in university studying as computer science. And it was good to upskill on some basic stuff there. And then I just got into Copilot, which is a product that we have in our inbox for helping you get better answers. It searches it searches for content, and yeah.
I remember you were very customer focused on Copilot. You were really trying to drive, is this actually valuable? Is this delivering real value? Are people using it? All those good things.
Yeah, so I think one thing I quickly grasped, I think, on AI products is that I think it's very easy to build prototypes in AI. And the hard thing is to build it reliably. So you can very quickly go from, look, this works in but it takes you months to get it to actually it working really well.
Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest reasons I was fighting for the scope of what we did, because you can start off and think we want to take on the world at Copilot, but I think it's better to take on smaller slices and deliver that really well. Because while prototypes are cool, it doesn't last that
I mean, for me, this is always the classic number one AI product pitfall, right? And I sometimes wonder recently whether Apple fell into it, right? In that was this rumor that internally, they had a proof of concept and it worked well, And it's like you always got to ask who's carrying the bar for there's actually to be enough to ship in production, because it can seem like you're near and you're actually very far.
Yeah, I think that's a great question or like great thought. Personally, I see that like ultimately, I think the exec team will just see a prototype. They won't really understand like how reliable it is actually.
Yeah.
And it's like up to the people who are in the weeds of things to have determine what that quality bar is.
Yeah.
Like in Copilot, for example, we had something called interaction rate, which was what we used to define it, and that was we measured that based on whether the answers were like inserted into the composer or whether people manually copied the text from the answer. And we use that to define quality. But even then, like you can very easily like do scope creep is very easy.
Got it. Okay, let's start talking about tasks. So, we're in the AI group and I was kind of looking around the AI group. We're looking at like, hey, who's a good work stream lead? And, you had been very successful in Copilot in its closing stages. And so it felt like you were a great choice to me. And so that's kind of where we ended up there. Tell me a little bit about like, getting started. And maybe we should set the scene because, Finn could do tasks. It could make API calls from launch, like way back 2 years ago, using our own existing stack with like our workflows product and what we used to call custom bots. Intercom's been able to have bots call APIs for years and years and years. And we had that, but we wanted to do something like next generation. And so that was sort of like what your work stream was broadly. Tell me about that. Like, tell me about the start.
So at the start, when we came in, we wanted to have Finn agentically call these like data connectors. So you have a bunch of APIs that Finn has been exposed to, and Finn needs to be smart to like decide when to call it. And that might include also like collecting information based on what the API needs.
So is this something like, hey, I've got a refund request to process, but like first I need to go and look up the person's order. And so it needs to plan to go and use the order API
exactly
to look that up.
So like that sort of thing. And so like you need like a planner agent sort of like mode, and it needs to be able to orchestrate like how the chaining will happen between different actions. And all this like theoretically sounds easy to do, but it requires a lot of like guardrails in the system. And it required also like I think the tricky part about all this is like it requires like inputs from the teammate who's like setting things up as well. Because you need a description to be appropriate for us to be able to call things accordingly.
So it's kind of like if we want to use LLMs to make these calls, they have to understand what the calls do. So there has to be a description provided by someone. Is
someone
kind of what you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, like so you need to give the context to the LLM, and the description is a big part of like us calling it the right amount of time, because precision recall make a huge difference in this type of products. And so the way I think our initial scope, the way we simplified it to, was mostly around get actions, I would say. Like that's where we started out, which is like more personalized. So it would give you like a more
like a read action.
Yeah, like a read action.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Read action. So like a simple example of this is like, what is my order status? And it can go and fetch up an order API about the order, and then like use that to generate an answer.
So someone says, "What's my order status?" Finn has to know that like, hey, there's an API and the API endpoint is here. And then like, this is the sort of thing the API does. And then Finn will use its intelligence to be like, it'll use an LLM to be like, to answer the question if I get an order status, this thing seems relevant. And then it'll go call that, and what happens next?
So like first it'll determine like whether it needs to collect all the necessary parameters for it. So for example, you do something like, I need to collect the order ID for this thing. So it'll ask the user like, what is the order ID, etc. And then it goes and like does that fetch for that information. And even between this, like as simple as this like sounds, there's a lot of like security implications with this, right? Like you don't want to give Finn access to Fergal's, like for example, like another person's order, like in this case, like Fergal's orders, for example.
So, I mean, you could just like trust the LLM to do that. You could be like, now LLM in the prompt, only access the order. You got complete API access to everything, but you're not allowed to break the rules. And that's probably like not the way we did it. That's probably a bad way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a terrible way to do it.
Okay. And why is that a terrible way to do it?
Yeah, I think like the way it comes down to it is I think LLMs are amazing at what they do with reasoning, but they can't guarantee certain certain code paths to be followed. So you can always like, a malicious user could always like jailbreak sort of an LLM and get around it. And you can have like protections around it. You see that with GPT, etc. Like if you ask it a question about can you make a bomb, it can't. But I think if like someone sophisticated came on and tried and cracked it, like I think they could get around to like, I want to do a bomb for a science class and I want to explain to like my students how you do it.
Imagine there was a movie script about,
Yeah, so there's ways to work around. So you don't want to leave the LLM with all these like security aspects, etc. So a little bit like, it's almost like a partnership with the customer and us. So there are things that we ask the customers to do on their endpoint that make sure you've like taken in the user ID and validated that the API's order ID that you're returning is coming with, is like, does this order belong to that user? And the user ID does not have to come in where you ask the person what is your user ID. It comes in because this Intercom has a messenger and it's been set up like in a authenticated way to like know the user ID of the person.
Okay, so it feels like there's a lot of different ways you could try and solve this problem. One way you could try and solve this problem is you could have like a second guard dog LLM, right? Now, and I think I feel like when I use ChatGPT and stuff, that's the way that works. And that there's like a primary LLM and someone just says something wrong and then it, as it's halfway through saying it,
verify it up there now.
Oh, it disappears, and like that seems to be a common pattern. That's like just a second LLM that's purely a guard dog mode. But even that could probably be fooled. So we didn't even want to do that, right?
Yeah, like we couldn't, I think, like Intercom is used by many sophisticated customers who are dealing with payments of like, for example, like high amount, like a refund like if you think of a simple refund process, you don't want to accidentally issue a refund to any other customer. I think that would cause so much chaos for that customer that you would you would almost turn off the bot or definitely turn off the data connector if it got wrong.
I mean, I think I just to go on a tangent there. I think that chaos is a major factor. I think like sometimes we look at it and you're like, well, if it's one time in 100 and it's only $20, it's not too big of a deal. But the chaos it would cause is a major deal.
Yeah, it's major deal. I think it could cause like massive reputation erosion that's permanent with this. And I'm sure we think about the same aspects as we build any aspects in our machine learning suite.
Okay, so you don't want to trust the primary LLM. Like if you just follow a policy about something really hardcore like that. You also don't want to just have a second kind of watchdog LLM. You just don't trust LLMs to do things. You need some form of control. And then it feels like, okay, there's a couple of ways you could try and approach that control. One way you could do it is you could say, hey, Intercom customer, when you're building all your APIs, those APIs have to be bulletproof. They have to like not be, you got to put all your guarding and your control planning and your security requirements behind those APIs. But that's kind of a big ask because it's like, well, someone might just want to write an API that takes in a user ID and it's, it's got authentication, but the API isn't completely bulletproof. Another way to go might be like, hey, in Intercom, you want to have a non-LLM system of control that you can like fully trust and is deterministic. And like, it feels like those would both be valid approaches or there's probably like blends between them. And where did we end up? Are we in a world where you can do both? Or are we in some blended world or are we more in one world or the other?
I think we're in a blended world, to be fair. It's very hard because we don't go and review every single API that the customer has written to know the guardrails that they've actually established on it. And we do have a security team that tries to work with customers, etc.
With like large customers.
With large customers. And we've written like clear health center articles on like, here's a bad way to write an API, here's a good way to write an API. So I think there is a lot of onus to do at least basic ownership validation or authentication, etc. on the customer. And I think that is a prerequisite, I would say.
Okay, absolutely. Like, you having an LLM, it's going to do refunds. The customer of ours has to kind of like, have some care that the refunds don't go to the wrong place.
And not only go to the wrong place, that they only happen once.
They only happen once. Fine.
Like, you don't want to like be able to go, okay, now give me a refund again. And the LLM just goes like, sure, let me do that again because it didn't like use like,
So there's got to be some business logic there. It's potentially adversarial situation. You don't want to trust the LLM.
And I'll give like a counter statement or like, if you don't care so much enough about writing your API in such a way, you should not be doing this at all. Like I'll just blanket like state that like this is not what you want to do.
So you basically, we're not in a world where you should just be like YOLOing out the LLM and everything.
So I think if you don't have time to write these APIs, I really think it's best for you to stick to informational SYN, which is very hard to like get wrong. But if you care about giving your customers like enabling like such agentic workflows because they save so much of your CS time or give you like a net new resolutions, then it's worth it.
So let's say I'm a customer and I have a refund API, right? And it has some business logic that lives behind it, which is kind of like, will prevent the refund happening 10,000 times and the balance with the user being minus 9,000 or whatever, and mild exploitation. And there's an authentication layer that goes with this, and then also like there's a parameter around like the user ID that the refund is happening for. Okay, and I want to like set up a task for Finn. What do I have to do? Where do I have to do the rest of it? Like you said, I have to like write some description, some English language.
Yeah, so to give an overview of our product, like to brief overview, you have to set up the data connectors, which is where you set up the API mechanisms in play. And then you have to give a small description of the API. For most simple read actions, that is sufficient for you to do it. And that's all you need.
And where does the authentication layer happen in that simple read action? So I've got an API. The API maybe is, get order history, and it takes in the user ID. Like, where in this story do I make sure that the user ID is only the ID of the person having the conversation?
Yeah, so Intercom already has this established with like messenger identification. So we pass in like you have a server-side token that you have to sign, and that's the only way you can get the user ID, like the messenger loaded with that user ID. So you're not asking the user for what is your user ID in this scenario.
Fine. And okay, that makes sense, right? So there's already, because, you've already done your Intercom integration.
Yeah,
it's
a logged in user example, this one though.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What about like,
non-logged?
Oh, well, no, let me go different. What about like the get order status, right? Presumably like a user wants to do in get order status, and, we know their user ID. Where does the matching happen, the auth happen that like, this particular user is allowed query for this particular order ID?
Yeah, so I think that has to happen on the customer's API.
Fine, okay.
Right, yeah. So like what should happen is like, and this happens I think even in like non-LLM processes, right? Like, so Fergal, if you went like, I want to get information about my order ID 10, and then the CS agent would go and see the order and they would say like, that does not belong to Fergal. I'm not going to give you information about that order.
Fine.
And the same thing has to be like exact same mechanism has to.
Okay, so I sort of need my permissioning and my authentication layer to be happening with my APIs on my server, and they probably exist for most business APIs. But then like, what does Intercom give me? What do I get from this tasks product?
Yeah. So I believe that has like these queries, has you like required to like look up data connectors, etc. Most CS, like a disproportionate amount of your time as a CS agent goes into like spending, like getting that information. You'll go to some admin tools, you'll find the order, you'll like look up these details, you'll like try and find the order body, and then like go and like give that information back to the customer. That's time consuming.
Right.
And like what happened with Finn is all this happens within seconds, really.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's the value that Finn has in this context for like a very simple read action. And I can talk a little bit more about a complex process as well.
Okay. So even though the authentication layer still has to be stored behind the APIs, there's still a lot of value, because actually conducting an action, might involve going and calling this historical API and that historical API, and then putting together a package of information that can then be used to do the refund. And where does
And I also want to add here that it's not just even a packet of information. Like, I think sometimes you have to like query multiple different APIs to get that information, or like augment it with like knowledge base. So you're like, here is like a status about your order. If you want to do further tracking, go here, etc. Like, it's not that trivial to do it as a CS agent, I think.
Can you talk me through, can you give me like a worked example of this where it's like, where it might have to use its intelligence to figure out that like, before I can accomplish this task, I first have to do X and Y. Can you just make that concrete for me?
Could you repeat that example?
Yeah. Sure. So can you give me a concrete example here? You're kind of saying that like, sometimes it's not trivial to figure out what you need before you can call the refund API. First you need like piece of information X or Y, and you got to go fetch those. Can you make that concrete? Can you give me a specific worked example?
Yeah, so I think I can try. So I'll start with a simple one around like contracts. For example, if you have contracts set up, and a user is asking about like trying to extend that contract, for example. But what if that contract has already ended, for example? And there's different like policies based on like renewing a contract versus like starting a new contract. So like in this case, we would automatically fetch the current contract details, say that there's no contract, and then like decide that what is the path that the user must take. So that's like a simple example, I suppose, of like
So that's sort of like business logic,
business
or
logic.
maybe even policy.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing I think about a bit is that in this LLM world, you know, okay, there's still the API layer. And
Yeah.
like, it's kind of not really changed. Maybe it's behind MCP and it's flooding out everywhere in your org. It's moving where it used to not be before, but it's pretty stable. But then above that, there's often like, there's a business logic layer, kind of like in the mid tier. Then often there's like a policy layer as well. And the policy layer may exist in like Google Docs that your CS team consumes.
Yeah.
And then like there's a business logic layer that's like in the backend admin tools that they use, which then go and call the APIs. And it feels like those outer layers are maybe blurring a lot.
Yeah.
This is the area of complexity for tasks. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. So I think the business rules and the policies definitely interleave here.
Okay.
So when you now, I think, so maybe just introducing the task product a little bit here. So
Yeah.
task product, the task is typically triggered via natural language query. So you write, I want to get a refund, and we will try and like match you to like what is the right process to trigger. At that point of time, when you've set up a task, you have a trigger description, and then you also have what we call like an instruction block in our system.
Okay.
And this is where you define both the business policies, the business rules, and potentially policies as well.
Okay.
So you might be able to define policies which you don't want the end user to know about, and as part of that, for example, like let's say you have a thing around like extending free trials. So your policy might be something around extend a free trial only once for a customer, and if you think that customer is like valid because you like call their status and you say that we've not been able to extend their free trial and we've not done that previously, then call the API for like extending the trial.
Right.
But this is a very sensitive one because the policy is like actually very discreet and not something you want to share too often with your customer.
Because some people might exploit it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So like refund policies are very much in the similar vibe. Like 30 days is like typical, but often with a lot of e-commerce companies, you can get like 45 days, but you don't want to actually share that information with the end user because you're making a special exception here.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the world weave together. LLMs are actually very good at being able to handle these kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Often at Intercom, you know, I was talking to Rob, and in the AI group, we often think of customer service as like the exception handling branch of the organization, right?
Yeah.
It's like customer service is expensive. There are humans involved, and sometimes there's a customer care and success element, but pure old school hardcore customer service is like, I have a problem, something's gone wrong, I need help. And to some extent it's like, I am reaching out to contact you because I can't do this in the product. The logic doesn't exist because it's too hard. There's actually a really fuzzy probabilistic policy thing that judgment has to be applied here. You can't write it in code, or it's too expensive to write it in code. And LLMs now are suddenly getting good at these sort of like judgments and consuming documents. So this is why there's something interesting and new in the world that's potentially addressable here.
Yep.
But it's also hard.
It's hard.
Why is it hard?
So one of the trickiest bits about building the task product is not just the AI agent underneath the hood that we are using, but a huge component of this is like the instructions that go into this agent, and the instructions have to be written by teammates. There's a really like instructions initially feel like they're disguised as something easy for access. Like anyone can do it. Just talk to it in like natural language and it'll be done. But I think that's not true. I think that's the biggest misconception that we still have.
So as in like, it's easy to look at prompts and to be like, Just write it in English. It's so simple.
Yeah, and I think we made that mistake of like selling it in that way as well.
Okay.
Which is that we sold it like, hey, just write it in English and you'll be sorted.
It's so easy to sell. And this is something I think the whole industry is struggling with. And there's this bill to come through due here later, which is going to be like, it seemed so easy because you enabled the customers, back we were talking about earlier, you enabled the customer to make a prototype of what they wanted to do. It didn't really work.
Yeah.
And they haven't realized yet. So, I think there's a lot of free trial revenue, a lot of experimental revenue in AI generally at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask a specific question. For tasks, is the difficulty because okay, you set it up, you kind of said like, hey, we just give the user a text box, right? And then that's deceptive, right? So is it deceptive because like the LLMs aren't perfect at following the English language instructions? Or is it deceptive because like the users, struggle to actually write what they want because maybe they're bad at prompting?
Yeah.
Or is it deceptive because there's a bunch of lurking domain complexity that like has to be brought out into the open? So, I know there's a bit of this where like, it's like, my refund policy is simple. And it's like, write your refund policy then. Oh my God, my refund policy is incredibly complicated.
Yeah.
So how does it break down? Is it like the LLM technology not being ready? The user's not being good at prompting yet? Or is it that like, no, it's just domain complexity you bring out into the light?
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to like the answer. It's all three.
It's all three. Okay.
It's all three. And I think that makes it the most gnarly product I've ever worked on.
Right.
So we run a lot of benchmarks internally. And what we do is we divide our task into like various orders of complexity. So simple, moderate, and complexity. And what we try and do, measure the success of a task is by running it repeatedly and seeing if each outcome is successful for that same task.
So this is kind of like in terms of benchmarking the LLM reliability.
Yeah.
Like separate from like the domain complexity or the human prompting or the LLM being smart enough. There's also this other axis of like, is the LLM reliable enough?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and this is like answering to your first point right now. So I think we should like go piece by piece here. Yeah. Let's take the first point.
Yeah.
And now in this example, like in our benchmarks for like simple tasks, which is what I think most people need right now, because it can do like refund and stuff even as a simple task.
Okay.
We get like 100% near reliability towards this when we like run it like 5 times, for example, for the same task. Now it starts falling down with moderate task. It goes to like something like 89. And
what's a moderate task as opposed to a simple task here?
Yeah, so we use some deterministic conditions to check, like maybe a moderate task would have like multiple data connectors, like 5 data connectors are in play, for example.
Okay.
And the step, so we've done this is qualitatively, we've decided whether it's moderate or simple. So there's no hard-coded rule here.
Yeah.
And then we have a version of complex task, but basically the completeness falls quite drastically between like simple to moderate and complex.
Fine. So once there are more variables in play, more different API points, it gets a little bit more complex. The LLM reliability drops off. Maybe the peak performance is still good, so you can still make a demo that works, but in a real world application,
that's exactly like the reliability. I think moderate like can get pass at K of 1 being like 98%, but pass at K of 5 is 89%. And if you like go down further and further, it keeps dropping down, for example.
Fine.
So this is exactly, I think, the demo thing playing out. Like prototypes, amazing.
Okay.
As in,
So on top of the general AI issue, which is that it's easy to build a prototype, specifically for tasks, there's like a reliability issue just with the state of the art of LLM.
With the state
development.
Exactly.
If you need something to work, not just once off, but if you need it to work reliably 100 times out of 100, the LLMs have this hidden unreliability issue that doesn't come to the fore until you start running at scale in production.
Exactly.
Wheels come off.
And just want to flag that we believe that most tasks that customers have written today in our system, we would classify about 90% of them as simple. Like, I don't think we have any customer who's like writing super complex, because to be fair to them, we also give you ways to break out the complexity of the task itself by having multiple instruction blocks, for example, in the same task.
We said we don't have customers who are doing the complex tasks yet. And it's not just because people just haven't gotten to it yet. Like, is your claim that like, no, in the actual domain, the vast majority of tasks are simple? Because that's a different claim from like most of what customers are simple.
Sorry, I don't think I stated this well yesterday. What I'm trying to say here is that we have tools in our platform to help you break out a complex task and make it like into like modular, simpler tasks, for example.
Okay.
And that's what most customers do.
So even a task that seems complex, you
Yeah.
think most of them can be broken down into a series of simpler
Into a
tasks.
series of simpler tasks.
And I mean, I guess, you know, we're starting to move from problem space to solution space in the discussion here. But I guess that's an opinion, or that's a bet that we're taking with our solution architecture, right? Which is that, like, hey, complex tasks, it's easy to do a demo that makes it seem like they're ready for prime time.
Yeah.
But in practice, you're going to run into reliability. So we've done all this work to enable you to take a complex task and factor it into a series of simple steps.
Yeah.
And that puts a burden on the person doing setup, but we think it's worth it for the reliability.
We think it's worth it for reliability. Absolutely.
That's like an opinionated thing that differentiates us from some of our
competitors. Yeah, like most competitors don't allow you. They have like you are all in or all out sort of thing.
Right, as if you're fully writing a big English language description or not.
Yeah.
And so we worry that, are they vaporware? Are they real? We're never sure about this for sure.
And I refuse. I don't want to comment.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I get it.
I do want to like touch on like the second and third, unless you want to move on.
No, please. Okay, so we're going back. We're talking about the second and third reason why tasks is a tricky thing to do.
Yeah, I think prompt writing is like a really underappreciated skill even now.
Right.
Most people look at natural language and they're like, it's deceptively easy. We can all do it. But then you don't think about edge cases. So sometimes it's not going to be enough. If you like go back to our example of like e-commerce, where we had like our refund policy exception is 45 days for a customer. Like you have to also say that, do not like say that policy out loud if the customer tries to like hone in on that policy, etc. We have like some default guardrails built in, but there is like an element here of like partnership that you need typically to get to that level of performance. And what happens here, we have evidence of this where customers wrote something on their own, then they came to us, and then one of our engineers wrote it for them, and then suddenly the performance just shot up. So like no changes to the LLM agent happened underneath the hood, but there is like a change here in the prompt.
You know, the example you gave there, you could argue was a domain example, right?
Yeah.
But like, are you saying that specifically there's also, separate from like, have you described to the LLM the full generality of what you actually want? Separate from that, there's like is your description, is your way of explaining it to the LLMs good? And, you know, are you able to explain it to the LLMs in a way they can understand, which is still a bit of an archaic skill. It's a lot easier than it was a year ago, but it's still hard. Where does that break down? Are you saying actually that there's a large amount of like, you know, you had figured out what you wanted to do, but you didn't explain it properly?
Yeah, I think there's a large amount of that. I think most cases where we see people think only of the happy path.
Yeah.
And they don't think through the edge cases. That's what I've noticed a lot.
That's a domain issue, right? Because that's like, it's like there in your domain, there were edge cases that you as the programmer failed to articulate.
Yes.
That is a bit separate from like the thing you were articulating to needed to be talked to in a specific way, you know?
Sure. I think I'd agree to that as well, which is, that it's like a little bit of domain issue, but I think most folks who write it don't factor that in, despite it, like if they had an instruction book for the CS agents, they might have like covered all those edge cases, but they forget to cover that here. So like, yes, maybe that's a domain issue.
I mean, I think if you move this back to a traditional programming thing, I guess you could say like, is the issue like that the requirements were underspecified, or is the issue that the person maybe made a really great TPM at the requirements, but they couldn't convert it into C++ to make it work? So like, you know, if it's a pure prompt engineering issue, I'm like, that's more like the engineer couldn't convert it into C++ or the TPM couldn't. Whereas if it's they forgot the edge cases, it's more of a
I don't know about that. Like, because don't you think a good engineer would be able to spot these issues and say like, hey, you didn't actually tell me about all the edge cases?
I do. I just don't really think it's a feature of LLM prompting, you know? Like for me, that's like
more business complexity, not model
complexity, not being modeled correctly. Exactly. So
okay,
it's something they would also have bit you if you were trying to accomplish all this in a deterministic way with the tools of 10 years ago, you know?
Yeah, but I just think the deterministic tools for some reason the UX lends it more easy for you to like think about all the other edge cases compared to like a natural language. I think that's the
Yeah.
part which I think is like tricky.
I buy that. I absolutely
Okay.
buy that. That like when you're writing in English with an LLM, the magic of it is that it's got this fuzzy intelligence, and so you don't need to specify everything in the detail you used to.
Yeah.
But the catch with that is it's deceptive because you still need to specify more than you think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah.
I mean, I often think about like as the AI tech level rises, I often think about like working with people who are like more and more skilled. Like if you hire a super skilled person, you're able to give them an extremely high level instruction.
Yep.
And they will go away and use their judgment to fill in all the gaps around it.
Yeah.
If you've got like a super junior person
Yeah.
not very competent, you might need to give them like extremely detailed instruction.
Yeah.
And separate from that is like, are they competent in themselves? Will they follow the instructions? Some people just won't even follow the instructions. I think we're seeing mirrors of all of these in LLMs, I think it's important to tease this out, as we work with it. So,
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm still thinking through like cases that we've had of like where people have not written the instruction itself well.
Yeah.
Sometimes like the LLMs are also literal in
Right.
how they interpret the instruction. So, but maybe it's like less of a skill, like less of a problem compared to like knowing your domain business and like being able to like outline all of those policies.
Oh, okay. So would you kind of, I guess, after this challenge, you kind of adjust things. You're like, actually, the issue is less on the prompting. It's not that what you need is like, it's because I'm like, do you need more TPMs?
Yeah.
Kind of like factor your business out if it's full capacity. Or do you need more like prompt engineers to be great at translating the requirements into LLMs? It sounds like you need more TPMs.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, like translating them into business requirements is
Fine.
probably more important.
Got it. So, I mean, that is kind of like old school competence.
Yeah.
That should exist out there in the world.
I do think we should like also mention here that let's say when customers like notice issues that have happened, if you're not good at prompting, what you typically try and do is you go and like immediately like try and address that issue that was like reported.
Sure.
And in some ways I think a lot of customers on their own end up going one step forward and two steps backward.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is always the issue. Like from the earliest days of Fin, I have been extremely reluctant to open up Fin's core prompts to customers. And like, it sounds bad. And one of our values is to be customer obsessed, but it's just so easy to shoot yourself in the foot with these things.
Yeah.
It's so easy to be like, I've got a problem. I will put in a fix to the problem.
Yeah.
But then the other side of that,
Exactly.
you got to test the other side as well.
Yeah, so I've had many customers who've done that. That is why I still think like prompt writing, maybe I'll put it at number 3 in terms of priority here.
Right.
But I think there's the industry has to still catch up to prompt writing as being a skill.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think in a few years, this may not be a problem. But right now it still is.
Prompt writing and also like probabilistic system behavior, probabilistic system engineering. Like for me, it's always like, oh, the thing was, it answered too eagerly. So I'll put in something to make it more conservative. And it's like, you won't see all the other things that it...
All the other good side.
Exactly. Yeah. It'll pass your test case for when it'll answer too eagerly, but you don't have a test case for was it answering too conservatively, and you're going to like crater your resolution.
Exactly.
Right? You worry about this sort of stuff all the time. Yeah. Okay, cool.
That's one aspect.
All right, cool. So that's interesting. It's an interesting taxonomy of the different things in the problem space of tasks. How are we doing in terms of solution spaces? Have we like built a product? We're on like generation 2 or 2.5, maybe even 3 of the LLM tasks product.
Yeah.
We're feeling we've built something that's useful for at least some people.
Yeah.
I think it's still pretty hard to use.
Yes.
We did an internal session recently where I didn't do so good at like writing. I was like, I'm going to write a really sophisticated task and get it done in 30 minutes. And I was like, did not get it done in 30 minutes. So it's still tricky, right? It's still tricky to articulate your domain. How are you feeling? Do you feel like we're done here? Do you feel that our whole model is wrong? Do you feel we're still learning about this? The industry's still learning about this? At least what we have isn't total vaporware as far as we know.
No, so we have lots of customers who have had a decent degree of success on it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we've nailed it.
Have we had customers who've had a decent degree of success on it where they set it up, or have we almost always needed to get
Almost always set it up on their instead of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like our promise is that, well, at least you can maintain it, because after we set it up, you got like all these nice workflows and it's factored out and stuff.
Yes.
Maybe some other approaches that other competitors have, we're not even sure they work. And if they do work because their engineers set it up, we think it's got to be impossible for customers to maintain. We hope we're in a better position. Are we in a better position?
Yeah, I don't know if most of our competitors actually have like a forward deployment engineer model. So I do think will help you set it up. In fact, spend months, as far as I know from some customers, on like setting up a single task.
And we've learned that we've had to do this for our enterprise customers. We built a whole services org to do that.
Exactly.
But that's not the height of our aspiration. We're Intercom. We want to productize things.
Yeah.
We want to make it self-serve.
So I think this is like a tricky one,
Yeah.
a tricky discussion to get to.
Yeah.
So maybe you should back up and like
conversation.
yeah. So we should talk about this.
Yeah.
I think when we set out, I definitely had the aim that it should be a product that's available to everyone, all our customers, which is more than 5,000 Fin customers and growing. And my ambitions got pegged back after seeing all these problems that you mentioned, like the 3 at different dimensions. The first I have full in my control, but I can't control if you write shit instructions, then you get like a shit result at the end. Like I just can't control that.
Yeah. So our customers who we respect struggle to write
it. Like that's the polite way to say it. Yeah. And then, so my ambitions did peg down after that. And it was one of the first products that we released, which was like called gated availability.
Okay.
And this was not done for any financial reasons. We did it purely because we think you'll have like maximal success if you partner with us and we help you write at least your instructions for the first time.
Yeah.
So
we want to teach customers. We want to make them.
Want to teach customers. We want them to actually enjoy the product, not get frustrated and like give up in 30 minutes, etc. with the product.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot we haven't figured out around even like UX, etc. around the product.
Yeah.
Now things are changing though on this front. Like lately, I've had the feeling that some of the problems that we've had are because we built it on an older engine that we had, which is the workflow engine.
Okay.
So this mixture that we have of like where we hand over to a deterministic workflow manager and then come back to this agentic manager does not really scale. And it's been confusing from day one. I just didn't know a workaround for this for like complex tasks, for example.
And we did that. We were like, hey, we've got all this power of the Intercom platform.
Exactly.
All these workflows you spend ages building. It gives you a lot of power.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to think that maybe that power is misplaced, or like that having to put these probabilistic tasks within this existing workflows engine, it's just the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think customers will set up suboptimal flows using the old world, like deterministic blocks, rather than like using more agentic capabilities, for example.
Yeah.
And I think the conversation just don't look that great when you go through bots and you're clicking through buttons, etc.
Sure.
Which we all enable as our workflow product if you decide to use it. I think we need to...
But we're never sure about that, right? Because it's like, and this is a case for like Core Fin as well, right?
Yeah.
Core Fin, you come to it, it's beautiful, it really works while it's successful. But like a lot of customers are still like, no, Core Fin has to live within a deterministic workflow, bots and buttons, old school thing, because before it's allowed to come in, I need to figure out if it's just a sales thing, or if this is a VIP customer, I don't want them talking to Fin. And lots of people have their VIP customers talking to Fin and they're very happy, but some people just don't, right?
Yep.
And so, it's quite a big thing to say here that like, no, task has to exist completely outside workflows. Do you think that? Is that where we're going?
Yeah. So I don't think we'll be able to build a product that satisfies all our customers.
Okay.
Like, so let me like get that straight. Like, I think there are customers who are still like, when you have a customer base that's as diverse as Intercoms or Fins, they're all at different points of their journey.
Yeah.
Some customers, even big ones, are like, we are all in on AI, and they have Fin deployed right out of the bat. there is no special escalation, etc. And the escalation rules are configured in guidance for Fin, right? Like they trust Fin to be the good first point of contact.
Yeah.
And then we have customers, as you mentioned above, who are like, there are certain audiences where Fin is not allowed to like jump in, or we want to do some predeterministic checks before we like allow it to do.
Yeah.
So customers are on this broad like spectrum.
Yeah.
So I think the way we should build things is we should bet on where we are going to be in like 1 year's time, for example, like a little bit more future facing rather than the old world. As you mentioned right at the start, we already have a way to do things in the way if you want full deterministic, like custom answers, for example. So here we are talking about, I think what we're building a product for should be more catered towards customers who are ready to go into this journey.
Yeah.
And there's a surprisingly lot of them.
Yeah.
Like I think and they're growing every day. Like if you see some of the adoption that we've had for MCP or actions, for example, and we've done like barely any marketing for them, it's astounding to me like how people like do it. Even I think a few months ago, like 2 months ago, I saw a LinkedIn post of someone who was like, oh, this is so amazing. I am like able to personalize my campaign results and send that via Fin. And they were talking about a product that we released like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So like customers are just coming onto this journey.
Yeah.
And we need to like think like a few steps ahead.
It's super difficult. This art of like product development in the AI space is so difficult because what customers want changes so rapidly.
Yeah.
It can switch on a dime. Like I remember when we built Fin, and I kind of like led the early like design envelope of Fin, and Fin was like super opinionated, and it was like, you want like to do all these things. No, you're just in this AI world now. Trust the AI, it's going to work, and it has worked, and it's been great. And I think that the level of the AI also increases over time.
100%.
So even if like there's a few edge cases you're happy with at launch, a year later it's working great for you. And so like maybe we just need to do something more like that with tasks. It's so hard though, because people, tasks is also like it's touching these really complex parts of your business. And so like some people are like super cautious and they want extremely high degrees of control.
I think we can give them that.
You think we can do both?
I think we can do both. Yeah. I'm like convinced we can do both now. I think there's like things we've been experimenting with are around having code blocks, for example, in task, and having ways to like bring some determinism into the instruction, like natural language instruction itself, and guarantee that Fin will not see anything inside that if condition if you've not met it. Like I think those are the like types of controls that customer need, and that simplifies their workflows to almost start looking like what they would give to an agent as a procedure. So I think there is something there that is very valid, that is worth chasing.
So you think we can do both and still have the, I guess, the bet we've made that like if you have a really complex task, you will probably still want to factor that into a series of simple steps. You'll probably still want to keep that, but just that the overall container that tasks are in, it's a bit more AI, a bit more.
I think it should be completely controlled by Fin. Like Fin is, I'm betting on the trajectory of LLMs. I know the increments might be small, but we know new models will come out. And I think the model layer is not a problem here.
So you're describing really the next bet that we're placing with tasks, the next generation of our product. When's customers going to be able to get their hands on this?
Tricky question. When I get like investment into vision,
you're making your pitch for more.
No, I don't even think we need that. I do think, Fergal, I think I want to talk about one aspect here. Like, has we trusted? Like,
I think we got to give a basic timeline. People might be like, when can I get this? This sounds great. Should I wait for you?
I think the rough timeline would be about 2 to 3 months.
Okay,
near. We have a pioneer event on October 9th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to anchor towards. But this is all loose. Like if the product is not there, or like we feel it's not good enough, we should not ship it, obviously.
The probability of the last few sentences talking about the pioneer event getting cut has gone up a lot.
So
tell me, you said you want to go somewhere else there. You were saying something.
Yes, I wanted to talk about something that I think is interesting, which is that I think a lot of customers I see want more control of the bot.
Right.
Like
of informational Fin, of tasks.
Informational Fin and via
and
even of tasks. Like they want to control where Fin gets deployed, what Finn has access to.
This is dangerous because I'm always like, never
Exactly.
sure about giving customers. Yeah, it's dangerous because I don't want to be like on a podcast talking about our customers who we respect. I'm like, oh, people will shoot themselves in the foot.
But that's exactly what I wanted to talk to.
Yeah, but well, let's do it. Let's do it. But it's always, you respect your customers, but also we have a lot of data and stuff, and we build an opinionated product. And our North Star is to make people successful, right? Is to give them a great product that works. It's very easy to put too much complexity into an LLM product.
Yeah.
I guess is what you're going to say.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to like talk about. Like, I think we can build products that give you more control of Finn, but it could almost be detrimental to you.
Look, this is something like, I often, speaking very candidly, I often feel that I'm fighting the Intercom product development machine about things like this. And the reason why is that it is so easy for our product org to be like talking to customers, and the customer, one particular customer, when you're a big customer, maybe they're very sophisticated, they just want the ability to do X. And like, it seems reasonable. It'll make the product more powerful. It seems great. And I'm always like, but what about all the other customers? And what about when you make that same policy decision 10 times?
Yeah.
We end up something very complex. I'm always like, we need to bound and control the complexity of the LLM thing.
Yeah, I think
that's roughly where your head.
Yeah, I think that's roughly where my head is at as well. So that's one of the big risks I see of like, in some ways of like now what I want to shoot for. And this is like contrary to my opinion of what I want to shoot for, which is like, I want tasks to become more GA. Like, I want to bring all these like goodness into it, and like it's super powerful. But at the same time, I very much realize that you can shoot yourself in the foot with it. And
when you say bring in more GA, you want like every Intercom customer.
Every Intercom customer to have it. They don't have to get into this limited availability. It's much easier to use. We'll improve on the UX. I'm confident we can do that.
That's always something culturally I think we want to shoot for. Even if we're like, and we now know we have lots of data that, that our customer conversation volume is incredibly like super Pareto distributed. Small number of customers are really where all the volume is. Yeah. So the whole business is focusing more and more on making those successful services, hand-holding, we're doing all that. But I think it's deep in our DNA at Intercom that we always want to build a product that makes everyone successful. And we always have this hope, which is maybe misplaced, that like the way to the great product for the enterprise or the big customer is a self-servable product.
Yeah.
And we're not, I see you're not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know, that's like the belief. That's the big windmill we like to tilt at.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I think to some degree we can get it there, but
you've struggled with this a lot in tasks.
I struggled with this. Like, yeah, I think this is one. I don't even know if I should like say that I failed at doing this, or whether it was like I had a good realization that we can't do this. Like, I'm confused myself. And I think
it's okay to fail if you're in an incredibly hard domain. That just means you're learning. I think the learning rate's been really, really high.
Yeah. So, but I do think customers want this, and that is becoming clearer to me. And especially competitors are offering this, which
offering self-serve.
No, not self-serve, like control of how the bot is.
It
is something that competitors are offering more and more. And as you said, like, if customers are shooting themselves in the foot, they're doing it unconsciously because they don't know better. So they will go out looking for a product that offers that.
We see this all the time. And like, this got this touch a top level strategic thing, which is like, are we building a series of opinionated products like Finn that are like great at doing X, Y, and Z? Or are we building a platform where it's like, here you go, bake the cake yourself?
Yeah.
And like, my opinion has been very strongly that we're building a series of opinionated products, and I've pushed that through Intercom. And like the evidence for that, I think the success of Finn is evidence for that. But also, we've had customers who have left us for a competitor. And they've gone because they wanted, more control. And then they've come back because they're like, the resolution rate isn't as high. And we're like, if you want the resolution rate to be really high, you have to kind of like optimize a lot of these pieces. And that kind of goes against like YOLOing it out. Like, well, I think the bot should do X, Y.
Yeah.
So we want to give people enough power.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky line to go like
a super tricky line.
Super tricky line. But yeah, I think that's the big. We don't want to feel like going forward.
We don't want to be paternalistic, right? We don't want to be like sitting here like thinking, oh, we know best and stuff. Like, but sometimes we have a bunch of data and we're like, no, actually, we have a lot of evidence that the architecture should be X. It's really tricky.
Yeah, and I think it's really tricky when there's a lot of input that comes from the customer side, which is like where they have control, or that's like natural language based. Because one thing I noticed about tasks, which I've never seen before, was even changing agents within tasks. Like, we were switching like the architecture up a little bit. so much of that was dependent on what you'd written that it wasn't actually like that transferable to another agent, even though like it did so much better in our benchmarks, etc. It just didn't work. And like the more control you give, the harder it is to actually potentially like even do like migrations, unless you like really think about your architecture as super modular in pieces.
I think from a product perspective, there's a huge like credit crunch of AI product technical debt that's going to come down the line.
Okay.
And like we've thought about this from day one. Like Finn is opinionated. Even when we have like Finn guidance, which enabled customers to do all these things, it's kind of like it's a downstream prompt. It's not like a top line
it's
prompt.
not a top prompt.
So we
But SOP would be like sort of this procedure thing would be like a task. Task thing would be like a top down prompt.
And and I guess we just need to be clear with people that like, hey, if you want this power, we're going to be able to give it to you, but there might be an accuracy trade-off or a quality trade-off.
Yeah.
Here's best practice to get that quality. That's tough. I do think a lot of people who have done that, who have like very early made the trade-off in favor of like, here customers, just write your prompts.
Yeah.
They have a big dash that's going to come due.
Exactly. Yeah.
When they want to do like an LLM migration or an architecture change of their core architecture.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Now they have to invalidate all their customers' business logic.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Scary.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think there's I think that's going to be one of the hardest things with tasks. Like, you might get an obvious model that's better and you can't really pivot. You might have to like do like version updates, like, or like offer customers the ability to like switch your version on your own, because we know you require to like iterate your prompts a little bit to be able to do that.
I mean, if you go down that road where you're into like version control and migration, like you're in a world of hurts, because now you're going to end up with like all these customers who are on different versions.
100%. Oh, 100%. Yeah. But yeah, that's the, anyways. So that's what, like, if you ask me, like, what is the trickiest part of like task that scares you?
Yeah.
That.
Fine. Yeah. I mean, I think, I think we have a lot of sophistication. There's a lot we can do here. I just think it's an interesting point that a lot of AI companies on fast growth trajectories that are not thinking about this and that are instead just like serving very naked LLMs to have a big product debt that's going to bite in.
Exactly. Yeah. Like if your interface is basically a prompt that you get to write, I think that's really tricky to actually make ML improvements on, because a lot of it is user facing.
And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it'll be good enough. But other times, it's for the products. The product team needs to think about that a lot. Another topic I'd love to talk to you about is this taxonomy work that I think you're starting to do at the moment. And like taxonomy, what's that mean? Like, what are
the taxonomies that we have? So at Intercom, we decided to break down the different categories of conversations that are possible for Fin to resolve. I think the 3 or 4 main categories we agreed on were informational, personalized, and action. And we have a category of other for like the remaining conversations, which might include troubleshooting and things like that. We believe that about 30 to 40% are informational, about 20% are personalized, and another 20-30% are like need actions, for example. I disagree.
Okay, because I was just trying to say in a contrary way, I don't believe that at all.
So I disagree with
way more informational, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Because a task and action product, for example, is still fledgling and it's very new. It's barely run on like 10% or 20% of our conversations. But we've already seen customers who have 60% plus resolution rate and they've not set this up. So like, how does that work out? Like, is this just a massive skew across customers?
Yeah.
What I actually think is happening, and we're crunching the numbers on this, but is that informational is more closer to like 80%. And there's actually just vast overlap with personalized and action. So like if you go back to the query that I had about what is my order status, a very, very valid answer to that is you can say, go to the orders page, find your order and look up the status there.
Right.
That is a great answer. Like most customers should be able to like self-serve their way and find that information if they need.
Yeah.
And then the personalized version is where you call an API and get the result. That doesn't mean that query is personalized, in my opinion. That means actually it belongs to both categories at best. It belongs to both informational and personalized. But informational is very well capable of delivering you a valid and genuine resolution here. Like yesterday, I was talking to like the Amex and maybe I will skip this example. But yeah, so like I think there's a vast overlap between them, and informational is like way more valued and under indexed on than people think. And I say this as like someone who's leading the task product and does not even work on the informational side of it.
Okay, so I think there's a few things to disambiguate and pull out there. So the first thing is like, there's the issue of like what we're trying to do. So I know if like Des was in this conversation, he would rightly point out that like, well, hey, it's much better if you ask a question and you get told the answer to the question rather than told, go off and self-serve and check this other page, right? I think we agree with that, and that's true. While that's true, there's also the issue of like, there's a human, they're stuck. They cannot figure this out. And they have decided to go and reach out to customer support, which means they're settling in for like a 15, 20-minute human-to-human interaction. It's going to be slow. It's going to be high latency. They're frustrated. They're struggling. They can't just work the website. They couldn't find the information. And you give them this beautiful informational answer. And yeah, they do have to click on a link, but then they get their answer. That's a success.
That's a success.
And so, but like, I mean, that's not the height of our ambition. Like, I still think that, you said earlier, like, oh, that's a great resolution. It's probably not a great resolution.
Sorry. Okay, it's not a great, there's a higher quality resolution to give with like a personalized answer compared to an informational answer. So like if you went in the street and you asked 10 people which answer is better, I think most people would pick the personalized answer.
Right.
But like I think underrate the informational answer. Like when you've not like for the personalized answer, you have to like set up an API and do a lot of work for it, right?
Yeah. So that's where my head is at, right? And I'm like, we have competitors, and all our competitors, like, not all, loads of our competitors will sell against us in the base to be like, oh, all the informational stuff, the RAG stuff, it's all a commodity. Let's talk about tasks, right? And like, because tasks is beautiful to demo, right? It's easy to set up the demo of the sophisticated task thing. And it's like, but hang on, that tasks thing is going to take you months of heavy lifting to set up. And even if you build it beautiful, and even if there's forward deployed engineers, you got to get your security team, you got to get sign off. Whereas like the informational queries will unblock your end users. And I have sunk, I guess, mostly on me, the decision. I have sunk a ton of time to building Fin out, to making Fin incredibly high quality in terms of like the engine to resolve informational queries. And we've taken that from like 30% at launch to like 6-7% or whatever it is this month. And like, that's a massive difference. And like, I've done that, and we have your work stream working on tasks, and it's a big investment. It's probably bigger than some of our competitors' full engineering team. But it's a long road. And so I think, I think a lot of people, we see in the sales cycle, in our opinion, they undervalue, they should be really sweating the informational issue.
I think the informational, like to be fair to sales, I think the informational thing is like hard to demo. It's like not sexy enough,
Yeah.
The sexy thing is resolution rate. Like if you actually put us against a benchmark with any other competitor, I do think we come off at the top compared to all our competitors, like pure resolution.
We think that's the thing to focus on. As the AI group, we're very quantitative and stuff.
Then
the sales team, who are obviously wrong, tell us it's not.
So I see where customers come from in some aspects, that they value the higher quality resolution a lot.
And they should.
And they should. And
we have to give it to them.
And we have to give it to them. And for sophisticated customers, it makes sense to like do this.
Who can do the engineering efforts.
Who can do the engineering effort, etc. Maybe you have like a really great use case and you want to do it. But for most of our customers, I don't think you need to do anything here. You should just improve your health center content, etc.
That's the high leverage.
That's the high leverage thing to do. It's like low effort and high value. Task is high effort and high value. But
you have to pay that effort
cost. That effort cost.
And so like if you have 100 conversations a month, it's not worth it. If you have like 50,000, it almost certainly is, but you should still lock in the informational one.
Exactly, Ivan. So like I'm very surprised when customers are like, no, we want to prove the task thing out first before we actually get the information live. No, I think you should get the win, get the easy win, and then work on it. Like, sure, if you want to like improve the
we have a customer of ours who I won't name, and I believe they're doing well with Fin for informational queries, and then we have a competitor who came in and like started to sell a tasks product. And then when the time came to go live, they were like, you should put our informational things first. And I'm like, our informational are certainly better than their informational. Their product is very vapory. And so like, yeah, we get bitten with that a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to improve in the informational, which we've done like over the years. Like I'm pretty sure we have one of the largest volumes of like AI conversations going for a customer support
Yeah.
compared to our competitors. So we've made improvements on our RAG engines,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other improvements that we'll be talking about soon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think those are easy to replicate.
Yeah.
I do think customers want more control, or there are some complex processes which are like what do we call it? Exception handling processes, where you don't have anything in your informational content because you have to go through
Yeah.
a bot. Like, for example, like if you wanted to refund an order which went over the 30-day limit,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, you have to build out a process for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like most customers, you should be building your business and not like actually spending time
Yeah.
building these complex processes, unless you're spending like your vast amount of customer support resources that you need to like cut down and things.
I mean, this closes the circle. This is back to the argument for maybe why tasks is less of a self-serve product.
Yeah.
We still aspire to make it so that it's self-servable, but today and stuff where you need engineering help and stuff,
Yeah, I think
we're
we should
gauging
at
it
least
more.
make it more easy for our existing services teams to be able to write and iterate on it with higher confidence. But yeah, like I would still like, I think one thing we should not ever try and do is like see that our adoption of our task product actually reaches the same at like informational, like that's not even the right goal to aim for, in my opinion. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, but when you look out to the future, though, like we presumably want the best possible answer to every question. And like today, we measure resolutions, and it's important. But like AI, the technology level raises. Like in a year's time or 2 years' time, it's going to be even easier to set tasks live. Maybe an AI coding agent will integrate it with your API. You don't see a world where we want like everybody to be using tasks. Okay.
No,
I still why? Tell me. That's interesting. Yeah.
I think most businesses should concentrate on their main business. Like
Okay.
most businesses will still die.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, like you still want to spend time writing your APIs for customer support, or do you want to like actually go about like improving your own product?
Fine.
So like
Okay.
I think health center is still going to be easier to do. I'm sure we'll make bunch of improvements and tasks will become simpler and simpler over time.
So this is
But not
especially
gonna be
this is the SMEs of the world and stuff. Like
Yeah.
you think like a small businesses for the foreseeable future probably not going to be deep adopters of tasks. Instead, it's going to
I don't think I think unless they have like exceptional use cases.
fine. Okay.
Like like okay, like I can imagine that if you are a food delivery business,
Yeah.
like informational will probably not be a great fit for you. Like everything is around like, I want my order now. My food was like damaged. I got the wrong thing delivered.
Yeah.
Like you need to invest in this. But I can't imagine that as a 2 people business, you have a food delivery business. Like
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Interesting. Okay, Pratik, great discussion on tasks, on your work. I'd love to kind of ask you something kind of more forward-looking. What are you really interested in? What's exciting to you in the space of like AI or AI meets your work here?
Yeah. I'm hoping that we can like make our task product more easy to use, so you can have like great experiences with it much more easily. Like we have like features coming in where we make it easy for you to test your processes out, etc. So it might be like more akin to like a software engineering experience rather than that what we have today. And overall, yeah, I think I'm just excited by the new set of models that are going to come. I'm hoping for like reasoning models which also have like low latency and the uplift that they might provide. For example, like there are like different dimensions that we have to improve on, like reliability, latency, and I think you might be able to like bring that together over the next 1 or 2 years into like a really cool product.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's very exciting. The whole world is switching towards reinforcement learning at the moment, and I think that there's potentially ways that will increase reliability over time.
Yeah.
And it feels like something that should be amenable to reinforcement learning. Maybe we'll get some of our researchers to look at that. We'll see.
I can't talk more about that. Yeah.
Look, Pratik, thanks a million for coming and having this like kind of candid conversation on this podcast. And really look forward to well continuing to work with you and hopefully having you again here as a guest sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here.